I want to share something remarkable with you. Have you ever had that feeling where you stumbled upon a piece of information or a book or whatever else that's equivalent and wondered how on earth is this not being taught in schools all around the world? How is this not general information that everyone needs to have? Well, this is exactly the feeling that I had after reading Neumann's book, The Origins and History of Consciousness. And this is the book that I want to talk to you about. So, Erich Neumann was a Jungian psychoanalyst, but a very special one. He still remains probably one of the most brilliant thinkers I have ever read. His work is remarkable. If you read this book, you will see that he sort of makes these two gigantic achievements with the book, while usually one would be enough or even half of an achievement. But no, he makes these two major contributions to the field of psychology and also anthropology. Because on the one hand, this book is a fantastical gathering of so much anthropological information. It's like Neumann collected every single piece that was relevant or that is major in some way about every single culture or tribe or whatever in human history and put it all in like 400, 500 pages, which would be remarkable on its own. But on the other hand, especially in part two, we have a psychological mapping on to these anthropological foundings. Like you probably heard of the Jungian archetypes. And with Jung, he really did a lot of work to pioneer them and show that they exist. But Neumann fleshes the archetypes out and gives them so much evidence and substance that I doubt that anyone after having read this book can deny that archetypes exist. And the other part is how he maps on these findings and these shared and reoccurring symbols and myths across cultures onto a psychological theory of individual and cultural development. And while it sounds all like academician stuff, I really need to emphasize that this book, while being and sounding very academic-like and, gigantic in its scale of theory, is really about you. It's about the person, the individual. And reading this, you can see how so much of even our modern life is still conditioned or influenced by these archetypes. I understand it may sound vague and sort of chaotic, but I really don't want to spoil anything from this book and kind of just give you a reason to delve into it, because it is a very thick book. But I must tell you that it reads sort of like Tolstoy. If you ever read Anna Karenina, it's sort of very structured and the paragraphs or the chapters are very short and you can kind of just feel a sense of progress the whole time. And if you just spend, a month worth of evenings on this book, I guarantee you, you will never look at humanity, yourself, your family, whatever, the same again. And it will be worth it. But I do want to give you an example of the things that Erich Neumann delves into this book, especially if you have no prior Jungian knowledge. So one of the most interesting things, at least for me, that Neumann develops in this book is a term called participation mystique. It was coined by Levi-Bruhl, I think, but Neumann really does it justice in this book. So participation mystique was born when these modern anthropologists found out these ancient tribes still existing and they sort of went in to investigate them. And what happened is they saw that these tribes really have no separation from what's really personal and individual and happening in the outside world, outside of their control. So, for example, many different and unconnected tribes, whether in Africa or the natives in North America or South America or even in New Zealand and Australia, used to have a very similar ritual where they would spit into their hands and raise them up to the sun. And when they try to ask, like, what does this mean? They would just say, we just do it. But in essence, they found out that it helps the sun to rise up. For example, a specific native tribe in North America would say that without this ritual, the sun would not come up. So this was coined to be participation mystique, a projection of inner contents out into the outside world. Whenever we're dealing with astrology or superstitions or totems or these, guardian animals and things like that, outside contents, which really, if you think about it, have no at least causal connection to us, we have participation mystique. It's a projection of inner content to the outside world. So when we say, you're gloomy as the, clouded sky, that's kind of a very basic example of it. And Neumann really delves into this participation mystique and shows how it's not really a state of primitiveness, but really it's a state we all share. And I have a story about how participation mystique manifests in modern daily life without you even actually noticing what's really happening. So when I was like 18, 19, something like that, I really got into this YouTube subculture of people starting side hustles or small businesses that eventually they scale up to like these $1 million ventures and end up retiring at like 25 or 30 or whatever. Being 19, I decided I'll give it a shot. It sounds like a great deal. The niche I ended up landing on was a car rental business, but not for like personal use, but for Uber drivers, or at least the equivalent of Uber that we have here. I ended up buying a couple of Priuses and renting them out. But the problem I encountered, which I didn't understand at the time, was that my consciousness, being 19, couldn't really handle the requirements or like the stress of having a rental business and being the sole decision maker. So I found myself in a situation where I had to make almost daily or at least weekly decisions which could have a huge impact on my financial well-being, and not only that, on the financial being of others, because I had these drivers which depended on me for their salaries. Too much to handle at 19, I understand now, but naivety does that to you. So what slowly ended up happening without me noticing is that whenever I had to make a bigger decision, for example, whether to take on a person and let them rent out this car, is I would flip a coin. And I know it sounds nuts, just imagining me making decisions by flipping a coin, but that's precisely what was happening, the participation mystique that Neumann wrote about. I projected or outsourced my decision to flipping a coin. But now looking back on it, what I didn't realize is that if I would flip a coin and the decision was one that I truly in my gut feeling didn't want to do, I would flip it again. I would make it best out of 3. Then I would, throw the coin away and like, this is stupid. What am I doing here? I'll just make the decision. But the point being was that this coin was a special coin of mine that someone gifted to me. And I endowed it with these magical decision-making qualities. And the more interesting part was that the one who gifted me this coin was someone I used to rely on for making decisions. So you can see how the person was projected onto the coin which they gave me, and through that I ended up outsourcing this decision-making quality that I lacked. So it's a really interesting mechanism of how this participation mystique can end up manifesting in what, seemingly I was a completely normal, rational guy just trying to do a business, but behind the doors, there it was. So you can really imagine like 3,000 years ago how pretty much all aspects of life were endowed with these magical qualities. With the development of culture and with the development of a collective consciousness, participation mystique sort of drops down and we get things like, science and causal connections. But it still remains, even in us moderns. We're still not rid of these remnants of participation mystique, even though we take ourselves to be these all-conscious, rational, powerful scientific beings, especially, with the rise of AI. We can pretty much demolish any misconception or superstition, at a tip of our thumbs. And another part of this book, since it's called The Origins and History of Consciousness specifically, it still reminds us in our modern day age, because this book was written quite a long time ago, in the 50s, I think, or 40s, it reminds us moderns that consciousness is still a profound mystery. And even with the advances of neuroscience, which have undoubtedly made huge progresses in our knowledge of it, we still don't really understand consciousness per se, like what it is. We kind of understand how it works, but not why it works, And this book, while it in no way tries to answer that question, this book reminds me of how mysterious and profound consciousness truly is. I feel we live in a sort of cynical age of science, where so much of mystery of life is kind of waving off and explained away as if it's the most, natural and easily explainable thing, when really it's not. And this book really shows it, like how fascinating consciousness is, and even human psychology. We're not only these black boxes of input and output, of stimulus and behavior. There's really so much more to humans than that. Really, this is what my channel is all about, taking these seemingly pornographic and just explicit simple things and trying to uncover, it really has much more to it than that. And Neumann's book is precisely the inspiration for it. You kind of start to see life underneath the facade. You start to look at it more complexly. You start to look too deep into things. And some people take it as a negative, oh, it's not that deep. But I disagree. I much rather would be thinking too deep and sort of getting lost in the details and in the in my interpretations, rather than taking it, for granted and living in this boring and gray world where nothing matters and everything is explained away and it's just A causes B and B causes C and things like that. The Jungians really have that effect in general. They're kind of shamanistic in that way. They sort of reveal the mysteries and the things we don't really know or the things we don't really understand. They sort of look at things from a completely different perspective than what you'd expect from a scientific inquiry. Neumann, I would say, is really the peak of that. While, of course, Jung is still probably the most profound Jungian, makes sense, but Neumann, in his ability to structure and to be accessible as a thinker, I think even tops Jung. And it's why I recommend him so much, even to someone who has no idea what this whole Jungian psychology is. It really reveals something otherworldly, but not in a cheap, astrology type of way, but in a very unique combination of science and empirical data, but also this introspective and depth psychology way. Anyway, I think that's all from me today. See you next time. Oh, and consider subscribing with notifications on, because YouTube really doesn't seem to care anymore otherwise and might not show you my new videos. Okay.